The United States has now been fighting two wars for nearly 8 years, and the strain on servicemen and women is enormous. The Army reported today that at least 128 soldiers took their lives last year alone, the most since they began keeping records 3 decades ago. But sometimes soldiers direct their anger at others. Cases of assault against wives and girlfriends are on the rise, and critics say the Army isn't doing enough about it. As you're about to see in the CBS News investigation, the results can be tragic.
Sergeant James Pitts was a decorated soldier, part of the early ground offensive that stormed Baghdad. He had spent a year serving with a combat engineer group providing Army operational support. It wasn't long before the horrors of war became his daily reality.
The only thing you could predict is you were going to get attacked. The worst part about it is smelling dead bodies, because it lingers forever.
The terrifying images began to take a toll.
Mortars, you hear the tail, and that's it.
Pitt started abusing prescription drugs as a way to escape and reached out to his command for help. He says they did nothing. When it was time to come home, he hoped the joy of seeing his wife and 9-year-old son would make everything better.
Just overwhelmed, excited, and relieved.
But the excitement and relief didn't last. He was drinking heavily, experiencing flashbacks, having nightmares.
I can't sleep. I can't get the war out of my head. I got my wife saying she doesn't love me anymore. I got no one in the military I can trust.
Family members say despite some obvious problems, no one in the Army required, even encouraged he get psychological help. According to this police report obtained by CBS News, Pitts was increasingly agitated and had threatened to put a bullet through his wife's head. Afraid for her life, Tara Pitts obtained a restraining order and notified his command, who promised to help. But that help never came. A week later, Pitts murdered his wife, drowning her in a bathtub. They'd had a fight, and her screams, he says, set him off.
And it reminded me of those screams of fear with the mortars and stuff. I grabbed her, and she bumped her head. Bad. And when I looked down, she was under the water.
He was sentenced to 20 years without parole. Pitts feels betrayed by an Army that once applauded his bravery.
Not guilty. Not only did they turn their back on me, not only did they talk me out of counseling 4 times, but then they flew in from other units to testify against me.
Lynn McCollum is the Army Director of Family Affairs.
Doesn't it make you angry to hear these stories about wives who are being killed by soldiers who are actually calling out for help?
There's a tremendous amount of effort going into providing that safety network and assistance for those folks, and it's very frustrating and disturbing when we don't reach everyone.
The numbers are alarming. Over the last decade, there have been nearly 90 domestic homicides and 25,000 substantiated cases of domestic violence at U.S. military installations. When we looked at the small town of Killeen, Texas, home of Fort Hood, we found another disturbing trend. Of the 2,500 domestic violence cases reported to police last year, half of them involve military personnel. The Army has developed a battle mind training program to help soldiers transition back into life at home. Most agree that all the systems and services the military may offer are only as effective as the people willing to use them. Only then will double tragedies like the case of James and Tara Pitts be prevented.
This war took my family from me. I've lost everything. Everything that I thought I was, everything that I had lived for a decade, gone, everything.